The Torah itself starts out the specific teachings, chapters in the Sefer Likutei Moharan, which is the work of the teachings of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, are the sections themselves are called Torahs, which just means teachings. It doesn't mean that there's another Torah. It just means that that's just the lingo in Breslov. So this Torah appears in the second half of Likutei Moharan, and Moharan is an acronym for Moreno Harav Nachman, which means our teacher, Rabbi Nachman. So he starts this by saying B'inyan hasimcha. We have a little bit of a chapter heading, meaning concerning joy, like on joy. And here, and also in the next Torah after this one, number 24, are essentially instructions on how to do this joy thing well. So he says the following thing. He says I'll read the Hebrew and I'll translate it as I go. He says, by way of analogy, when people are happy and they're dancing, think of a wedding, think of some sort of a celebration where people are together and doing this. Do not think of the Saint Vitus dance, okay? And then azay chotfim ish echad mi b'chutz. So what they do is they grab one person who happens to be standing over there, one sourpuss person who's just can't get in there, can't get into it. Shehu ba'atzus mar shchira, and he's in a state of sadness. And the Rebbe here uses an expression mara shchira, which means black humor, black bile. Now you're probably aware that really until the modern day, well, we'll get into it. I'll explain what that means. So what they do is they force him into the circle. So, and they grab him against his will. They force him into the circle, and they compel him to be happy with them. Right? Everybody loves this when this happens to them, right? You're in a good geschmacka depression, and somebody's trying to cheer you up, and all you want to do is slap them in the face because, like, what are you so happy about, right? Now, the Rebbe wrote this piece before the 20th century when the concept of the four humors was very commonly used in the medical profession to describe really the biochemical basis for emotional states. So we had, there would be black humor and white humor and red humor and yellow humor or bile. It was thought that these things all came from the spleen. The truth is that not much has actually changed, except that we've given these states, these emotional states, more classification. And because of diagnostic technology, we were able to locate their origin in other parts of the body, for example, the brain, right? The advances that we've made in understanding the brain and imaging the brain have enabled us to understand how hormones work, how neurotransmitters work. So, but to me, it's irrelevant, really, the fact that that he's talking about mara shchera, that he's talking about black bile, and that we don't commonly use that today. I think it's still a very good description of the phlegmatic, sad, depressed state. So just to clarify that what the Rebbe is doing here at first is giving an analogy. He's not suggesting that we should force other people into states of happiness. It's really an analogy for how a person can approach their own state of sadness and what to do with that. Okay, so he continues. He says, "Ken yesh be'inyan simcha." So this is exactly how it works with happiness, with joy. Because when a person's happy, then marashchara, this black bile, and yisurin and suffering, they jump to the side. The Rebbe is stating here that the effect of joy is to banish sadness and suffering to the side. We have to understand what that means. Putting things to the side seems to mean that when we shift our focus away from our problems and towards something that causes joy, the problems sort of shrink into proportion as opposed to what they were before. Right? As when we are concentrating on what is bothering us and what is making us sad and what is absolute hell for us in life, that tends to take up the whole picture, tends to take up the whole visual field. But if we focus on something else, sometimes a good joke is enough to break the pattern. Sometimes it takes more than that. Um, the idea is that proportion. It's a good practice, if only to come to the realization that yes, things are difficult in this sense. There might be problems, but there is still more to life than just the problem I'm experiencing. I also have whatever else we all have besides this problem. We have our health, we have our friends, our family, our livelihood, whatever good things also exist in our lives besides my problem, right? If we were, let's say, I take you to, let's say you're standing at the foot of a mountain, and that mountain's the mountain of your problems, okay? You're standing at the foot of the mountain, that's all you can see. And now we come down with a helicopter, and that's the Sukkot Shalom helicopter. And you come aboard, and then we fly up so that we can see the whole mountain range. There's just more here than just this problem. All of a sudden, like that doesn't take up the whole thing, and I can see that there's other parts. Okay, so he says, "Ken yesh be'inyan simcha." This is exactly how it works. No, I said that already. Now, okay, so that's level one, how to deal with sadness, how to deal with depression. Depression here, I'm not using in a clinical sense because that has something that there's other things that are going on with real clinical depression. He says aval malas mila yisera, but the level above that, is actually to pursue them, to pursue the problems, in order to force them into joy. In other words, what we're doing is we're not just this black bile, let's call it, is going to turn into joy. The thing itself gets transformed. Okay. Um the suffering now becomes joy. Just like the person that you've grabbed and forced them into the circle of dancing people. After a while, it's like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I cannot maintain this frown anymore. We're going around like crazy. The music is great. Everybody's smiling. They've grabbed me. There's nothing I can do. I have to dance with them. And somehow, by breaking the pattern, by moving the body, by getting more oxygen in, by, you know, acquiescing, by agreeing to take part, you might find that your own state changes as well. Right. We said that. So what we've done here is we've taken sadness and we have forced it into joy. So let's say, I'll give you an example, an analogy. Let's say that there are two machines. You have one that turns rubies into diamonds, and then there's another one that turns garbage into diamonds. Which one would you prefer to have? Yeah, I mean, there's no question about it, right? I mean, obviously, if you could turn there's garbage everywhere. If you could turn that into diamonds, you'd, let's just put it this way, you could probably retire in a day. Um, so the Rebbe is teaching here that the next level up, the level two, is to actually pursue sadness and difficulties in order to transform them into joy. This is a different approach because it's not just about shifting our focus and thinking positively. Just think positively. Whack. Who wants to hear that anymore? On the other hand, it's not that it's bad advice. Okay, there is a Hasidic expression, "Trach's good, wird sein good," right? Think good, it will be good. Um, so I can't argue with that. But this is a bit different. It's about facing our challenges head on with the perspective that, and this is a faith point, this is an Amuna point. It's a perspective that Hashem gave us these problems, and therefore they are blessings in disguise. What we're trying to do is remove the disguise and bring the difficulties into the overall picture of joy. See, often we tend to think that life is about the good things, our hopes, our dreams, our preferences. And when things go wrong, inside or out, we treat that as something that's like separate from real life. It's something that has interrupted real life. And when we have that perspective, it's hard to see the meaning in the suffering. Because it's like, what is this doing here? Yeah. And it's hard to understand that this challenge has been carefully choreographed for our benefit by the one who runs this whole world. Now, it doesn't mean that we always have to have that understanding. Sometimes there are things we just cannot understand. But at least we have that to lay back on. That Daddy's taking care of this whole thing. This was all planned. Now, in order to explain this concept, the Rebbe cites a verse in Isaiah 35:10, which is part of a chapter dealing with the eventual return to Zion, with very vivid descriptions of the joy that will be felt at that time. It's really talking about, first, of course, the restoration of the Jewish people to the land of Israel, building Beis Hamikdash, etc. But it also is talking about the entire world's transformation. So this is a very, very important chapter for us. Vivid descriptions of the joy that will be felt at the time. The verse says, joy and gladness shall overtake, and sorrow and groaning will flee. Meaning, it's the tendency of sorrow and groaning to flee in the presence of joy. That's the first step, right? That's the sadness now goes on the side because I've shifted my focus to joy. However, v'nasu yagam me'anocha, but basically the word is like this: sason is joy, simcha is gladness. Yasigu, the word yasigu means to overtake. V'nasu yagam me'anocha, and nasu means they will flee sorrow and groaning. Now, the Rebbe is focusing on this word yasigo about overtaking, and he is using that as a springboard to explain his concept that we can't just we don't just want to cause the sadness to flee. We want to turn that garbage into diamonds, right? So we want to overtake that. We want to pursue it, even though it's running away, because we're trying to create joy here. We want to actively bring on states of joy, and we have to pursue sadness and groaning and capture them and bring them in, forcing them into the overall picture of joy. Right? And then he explains how that works, basically just using the verse. And then he explains, he says, "Ki yesh yagon ve'anoch Hashem's hasitra achra," right? There's a concept, kind of a Kabbalistic, Hasidic concept, excuse me, called the Sitra Achra, which is in a certain sense like a mirror image of the holiness. Put it like this: it's like if we talk about good and evil, so we have the kedusha, we have the holiness, and then we have the Sitra Achra, the other side. If you were a Star Wars fan, that should not be hard to understand, right? That's the dark side of the Force right there, and it happens to be a mirror image of the good side. And we need tremendous amounts of help to be able to distinguish sometimes between one and the other because they look alike, right? So there are types of sorrow and groaning, he says, which are part of the other side. So that's an amazing statement right there because what it means is that there's actually types of sorrow and groaning which have a function in on the side of kedusha, of holiness. What does that mean? The ones that are part of the other side will not serve. He says, "She'enim rotzim liyos merkava ela kedusha." They do not serve as vehicles for holiness, right? There's there's that kind of like I think about the Merle Haggard song, like "Tonight the Bottle Let Me Down." There's a lot of these songs about just like sitting in a bar and drinking until somebody throws you out into the street. Like that's, and just drowning your sorrows in alcohol or whatever it is. Like that's not, that type of sadness doesn't actually bring you to anything. It's just kind of self-destructive, right? As opposed to types of sorrow and groaning, sadness, challenge, difficulties, which actually do serve as vehicles for holiness, right? Think of difficult and challenging situations that bring us to a greater realization of Hashem in our lives and in the world, right? This was hard for me, but if it wasn't for this, then I wouldn't have understood this. Then I wouldn't have gotten to this point in my life. And in other words, so that just brings us back to the verse in Isaiah. It's common to find in, especially in Hasidic writings, that will take a prophetic image of the end of days and then we'll apply it existentially, like in miniature, to the soul right now, right? Meaning that, right, we can read verses about ultimate redemption and the ultimate joy, but the Rebbe here is saying, why wait? Even now, within your own world, practice this type of redemption. Don't just wait for the sadness to leave. Grab it and transform it into joy. This is a this is like a more Eastern way of doing things, right? In Western medicine, we have this funny way of approaching it. Right? If there's a sick part of the body, they love to just cut it off, just cut it out. Tonsils, adenoids, appendixes, something's wrong, chop it off. Um, Eastern medicine is different in that the idea is to try to transform the unhealthy part, which is not integrated. The whole point of it not being healthy is that it's not functioning in tandem with the rest of your body, right? So what we want to do is we want to grab it and bring it in. We want it to function. We want it to be part of. We don't want to just cut it off. We want to bring it in. So it's a similar type of thing here that don't think your suffering is without meaning. It's part of your life experience. It's part of what makes you who you are. It's part of what gives you your strengths. Part of what gives you your wisdom. Part of what gives you your unique perspective in life. And you know, on some level, and this is what we daven for, is that we should be able to understand it on our terms, so that we can bring this into the picture.